I guess because of being a U.S. citizen, I'm very much that you're innocent until proven guilty, and they're very much guilty until proven innocent approach, which, again, I understand. I'm not happy being on that side of it, but their only function in the world is drug testing, and so that's why they have very much of they have all the power on their side with none on the side of the athlete. And I mean, but that goes why that they'll never be able to work for like the NFL, because the players union wants it to be much more equal, and they don't have that. They want, well, no, you're guilty, and you try to prove us why you possibly might not be. And even if in any kind of court, I go forward and I were to sit there and go, well, they found a metabolite in my system. Their test shows that there's metabolite. Doesn't mean it necessarily came from a steroid, but it's a relatively new test. It could have came from other areas, and the fact that I didn't have this steroid in my system with their own testing procedures 6 weeks before the fight, I think casts a lot of doubt. It would probably be thrown out, but they're judge, jury, and executioner, so there's nowhere to go with it. So I guess I waited out unless the UFC lets me go before that, and then.
Well, now you're 1 year in. Are you interested in that, or you kind of been a UFC guy for so long?
Fighting other places?
Yeah.
Yeah, actually, I am.
I see.
I think that Bellator and World Series of Fighting, Bellator especially, I think the fact that they have those open contracts to where they allow their guys to fight as long as they're not a champ and be able to compete in other areas, I think is a great thing, because the UFC really wants to lock people down and not let you fight, which, if you need to make a name for yourself and you want to be out there, I guess that's a sacrifice you have to make. But I think it hurts you as a martial artist, and that's what I want to be as a good martial artist. So I want to be able to compete in other things. Like I have a very strong interest in doing kickboxing matches, because I want to test stand-up just in a stand-up realm where taking the shot or putting the fight on the ground is not an option. And so I think that would really test my skills and ability and make me have to rise to become a better martial artist. And as long as I'm with the UFC, that's never going to be allowed. And so
have you asked them for a release?
There's no. Yeah, I have.
And they said no?
No, I haven't had a reply back. So.
I see.
So I don't know. I guess just business as usual. So, when I get done with the suspension, I'll just fight out my contract and, and then be able to move other places afterwards.
Frankie said you mentioned that you understand where people come from when they say, innocent until proven guilty. It gets kind of flipped around sometimes.
Yeah.
Before this happened to you, what was your reaction when other fighters would go through? And has that kind of changed now that you've been through this process?
Honestly, I never put that much weight into it. For example, like I remember I was closely tied to one with Shane Carwin, right? After my loss to him. I guess it came out a few months later that there was a list of a guy who was distributing performance-enhancing drugs out of some pharmacy or some doctor was doing it, and he got busted. So after he got busted, they looked through his list of guys that he sold to, and Carwin was on the list. And so I got a bunch of interviews and calls like, hey, do you think this, that? I'm like, actually, guys, I don't think it matters. I trained at a gym, or I've trained at gyms my whole life, and not everybody's a professional fighter. And, you get all walks of life, and you get that guy who's juiced out of his mind, who wants to compete and get there and train. And I've never been that impressed with it. I mean, if you think about it, the guy who we don't even see them in any walk of life, where the guy, looks purple, all juiced up, strong, and it's like, well, you look really good, but they typically only last for about 15 to 20 seconds, and they gas out. Blood pressure's through the roof. So I don't think there's actually a performance-enhancing drug out there that helps you as a fighter, to be honest with you. Not that I've ever been worried about. I mean, if you look at all the greatest fighters in the world, like an Anderson Silva, even when he came up with his positive test, I looked at him and was like, well, obviously he took something else. I mean, the guy really isn't taking steroids. Look at his physique. His muscles are smooth, and no, there's no technique in an injection. You know what I mean? You can't sit there and put a syringe and be like, well, now I can dodge punches, and there's no matrix level chemicals out there that just change people as fighters. Enhancing someone's strength at the drawback that it's going to raise their blood pressure, to me, is not a very smart trade-off in our sport. It's like, well, if they change this to 30-second rounds, then maybe being juiced up could be an advantage. But in a sport where anaerobic endurance are high on the pinnacle of requirements to be competitive, I never really cared. So if you tell me the guy across from me is juiced out of his mind, I never was like, all right, whatever. Bones still break and he still goes to sleep if I wrap a choke on him, so who cares? So I guess I've never been big into it where it's like, this matters so much. I'm like, does it really?